Hello, and welcome to the Relationship Renovation podcast. And once again, I am EJ Kerwin, and I am without Tara Kerwin today. She is away, and I'm doing what I did a few weeks ago, where I'm interviewing one side of a coupleship. And our goal here is just to have an understanding of all relationships are very different, but there's some universal struggles that people face, and the way in which they cope with them are often very different. And so our goal is to support all of you out there in maybe understanding something about your partner through hearing this conversation, maybe understand something about yourself and your own obstacles that you are up against. And so I'm lucky enough to once again have a really good friend on, a colleague, somebody I respect. He's in the mental health profession as well, and he's just a very interesting, very intelligent person, and I'm glad to have him. Welcome, Tim Mills.
Hey, how you doing, EJ?
I'm doing great. I'm actually, I also want to refer people back. Tim was on the podcast probably about 6 months ago. He owns a mental health facility in town called Cathexis, and then he also has another business called Cathexis Psychedelics, and he came on and he spoke a lot about ketamine-assisted therapy. And so that was a really fascinating episode, and something he has a lot of information about as well. So I mean, Tim, can you just first give us as much as you can, a breakdown of hey, this is Tim. This is where I came from. This is what I've kind of been doing within my life. This is how long I've been in relationship. Just a little encapsulation of who you are.
Sure. I want to start out with acknowledging Tara not being here. And
yeah,
I know that's got to put a little extra responsibility on your hands, and I'd try to pretend to be Tara, but I don't think there's anybody on this planet who could pretend.
I can't bring that amount of sunshine into this room.
She reminds me, being around her is like when I was a child growing up in Iowa, and on the kind of summer, autumn nights, we had a property that was right on the edge of kind of a foresty woods area, and all the fireflies would just come out, and the sky would be just completely lit up with the blinking fireflies. And as a kid running in that, I mean, it's literally like dancing in the stars. And that's kind of the same kind of body feeling that just being around your wife brings.
She is amazing. Not only does she light up a room herself, but she lights up all of those people around her. And it's just amazing, just to witness it. And it's why I fell in love with her. Was I remember the day she walked into the Mirsal eating disorder facility, and she had gotten hired there, and I'd been there. And she walked into the staff room, and I was like, oh my God, this person is ebullient.
Yeah. Well, it's like when I was mentioning the other day when we did a dinner together, and we hadn't seen each other for a while. And so my wife, Susie, her mother had just passed away. And so she was kind of going through a difficult time because, she's Greek, and you got My Big Fat Greek Wedding. My life is kind of a mashup between My Big Fat Greek Wedding and The Simpsons.
You're The Simpsons?
Yes, I'm Homer. But so she's been feeling down, and I've just seen it weighing on her. And we got together at a local restaurant, and Susie got there later. She had to meet up with us. And as soon as she comes in, she sees Tara, and Tara just turns on her magic. And just the look on Susie's face, how she lit up. It's like you could tell for a moment she forgot everything that was weighing on her. And, she looked like she was, a young 20-year-old kind of college girl again, that joy-free about her it was amazing. So I absolutely agree with everything you're saying about Tara.
Yeah. Well, so tell us about yourself, Tim.
Yeah. So for me, born in a small town in Iowa, our family moved to Houston, so that was quite a shock. And then while I was in Houston growing up, while I was in college, was working with some friends. We had the opportunity to open up a laser tag place together. I know, right?
That's awesome. that dates you definitely.
Right? And so as we were doing that, one of Susie's friends, her boss, where she worked at a Target photography studio in Dallas, had been involved in the laser tag community at one point. So she was moving back down from Dallas to Houston, and so Susie was helping her move. So that's kind of how we met. And
how old were you guys?
My gosh, I was probably 23-ish and she was 19 or so.
Wow.
So there's a little bit of an age difference.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of immature in many ways.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think
You were a 17-year-old, 23-year-old?
exactly, you got it. Hello ADHD. And so yeah, and she didn't like me at first. Susie, just because she kind of had developed a friendship with one of my partners, and the partner was there kind of, instead of operating the place, was there more as his own personal playground. And so I was kind of holding him accountable to that. So triangulation,
Mhm.
as we've studied, kind of started to take place, and she identified with her friend, and so was getting kind of mad at me. And if she were here, she could tell the story much better than I could. But she didn't really care for me at first. But somehow, something I did, not intentionally, that's for sure, because I'm not that sophisticated, kind of got her to take another look at me. And
Yeah.
that was, my gosh, 1990. So 33 years
33
ago.
years ago. When was the moment where you were sort of aware, like, oh, wait a minute, there's like something here?
Yeah. Well, so, okay, that's a really good question, because there's kind of different levels of there's something here. And I'm sure you can identify with that, So there's that initial attraction. And so I knew the first time I saw her, it's like, okay, she's cute. She's interesting. I could go out on a date with her. I could see that happening. Then as time progressed, I would say it was probably another year before it was like, oh, wow, this is like really has a lot of potential.
You were dating for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were dating, and there was a small disruption in that, in the sense that we had been dating for about 3 months, and then I got called up for Desert Storm. And so that was really rough, because we just started dating, and she's in Dallas, I'm in Houston. So it's 250 miles apart. So we're doing this long distance relationship, but we're both kind of young and clueless to how impractical that was. So we're making the trips to see each other and still seeing each other regularly. And then I get called up from the reserves to go to Desert Storm. And then we didn't see each other for probably another good 6 months or so. I think it was like June or July. I think it was July when I got back. And I was activated like in November. And so then when we got back, and so I'm sure that played a dynamic too, and kind of the bonding, because there's this whole group think about our troops and all that. And certainly not going to waste an opportunity on that, right?
Yeah. You're like the, that famous like World War II photo in Times Square where like the guy gets off the bus and he kisses the woman that's been waiting for him.
That's it. Or the sailors getting off the boat,
Yeah.
So then, we dated for probably another 6 months or so. And then I started to realize, like, I remember her coming down one time, and I was like, okay, this is really the person I want to spend the rest of my life with.
Yeah. What was it about her?
I don't know if there's anything that ineffable is kind of a word that says this transcends words. There's just something about the look. It's like, okay, this is it. There's just something about the shine in her, where Tara is the lightning bugs and like that. Susie is kind of like a beach sunset. She's more quiet, but she's just so stable and so serene, and you just look at her.
Sweet and kind.
Yeah,
she's like one of the kindest people I know.
Yeah. So whereas Tara kind of lights up the room, she just down regulates the room. Makes everybody calm and makes everybody feel safe and stable. And so there was just something about that, with like looking at the sunset and just saying, "Wow, I've seen 100 sunsets before, but something about this one just made me say, wow, this is special."
How did that like fit in with you? Like, what was it about that feeling, that sunset feeling, that regulation that you said that she regulates a room? Like, why did that fit in with you?
Yeah, I can't completely explain it. I've thought about it over the years. Part of it, to not get too clinical with all this, I think there's probably some attachment stuff that played in there. That there was kind of a fear of over-investing or getting, when you have various forms of attachment trauma to whatever degree, because it's inevitable that we're going to have attachment trauma to some degree. Everybody does, because relationships are complicated.
Yeah.
I think at that point it just hit where I was willing to say, okay, this is it's not too scary to get too close to somebody. This is somebody that I can get close to, and I'm not scared to do that anymore.
Yeah. She felt safe.
Yeah. And then that night she broke up with me. That led to a week of turmoil for both of us.
Emotional turmoil.
But we worked through it.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads to the point of kind of the Disneyfication of relationships. Yeah. That, we've grown up in our culture with this, the princess falls asleep and then the prince is a toad or whatever Disney fantasy it is, but they kiss and they meet and they finally get together and then it's happily ever after. Yeah. And that's not the way it works, man.
Yeah.
It's a relationship, a marriage. These are all points that are starting points of a new facet of the relationship. Yeah. And there's work that has to be done starting then to continue on. It's not something like you get to it as a goal and everything's great. Yeah. So,
I was talking to a couple the other night and we were talking about like that there are moments in relationship that can be, if you're not careful, points of divergence. They're often like stressors. They're having kids. They're big changes in location or job or deaths in your family, right? And if we don't course correct in those moments, sometimes we drift apart. Can you think of like an early, the first time in your relationship where there was a stressor and, maybe your attachment wounds or just your styles really got highlighted and it became a significant stressor in your life?
Yeah, I think, with her being from the big Greek family, and it's a very community-oriented family, that's extended family. We as the movie illustrates, you get together and there's a goat and 50 people in the front yard. It's that kind of get together. And then I'm from a very Caucasian, white, small town Iowa, and we had big family get-togethers, but it was a small town in Iowa, and I grew up with both sets of my grandparents that were in town. Both of my parents were born and raised there, so we did have a strong kind of nuclear family, but it wasn't nearly this big thing like that. Yeah. And so I think that led to some, because there's an etiquette when you're in a more communal family like that about there's certain things you share or don't share. It's a little bit more political, I think, in social politics. Yeah. Whereas in mine stuff, like our family shares finances with each other and share, the communication's more direct, but the boundaries might not be as complicated.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big one for couples is that blending of families together, and not necessarily blended family with stepkids and all that, but just literally like when we get married, when we decide we're partners, like how do we manage in-laws and the boundaries we have. And so that was it was a struggle more so for you or for her or both?
Well, I can't speak for her, but I can imagine I probably was a struggle for her several times.
What was hard for you?
Hard for me was like the stuff that you don't say to family that you keep quiet, because once it's out there, then it's out there to the entire family. And again, it comes a little more social political. And so I would get frustrated with, her taking this measure of tact sometimes. And that kind of goes with, personality of, as we talked about, just kind of being stable and making everyone feel safe. She's more that. And as I self-disclose, the ADHD, I'm like, let's talk about it.
Yeah,
consequences, what the heck are those,
Yeah.
So I think that created some stuff. One of the spotlight points that came to mind when you asked the question was moving out to Tucson, because we were in Houston at the time and we had just had our first child, and Tia was about 6 months old. And Susie wanted to come out here to Tucson because she had extended Greek family out here. And my only family were my mom and my dad in Houston. And so I had nothing out here or anywhere else. But we went ahead and we moved out here, and that was a decision I had to make. But that could have been a diversion point. That could have been something that made things really complicated.
Yeah.
And I had to choose on another level again of, is this relationship important enough that I'm willing to upend my home turf where I'm comfortable and start out, no job, nothing, bounced around for years trying to find a decent job here in Tucson until I ended up going back into counseling, and then things kind of took off.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like for you, like you made a sacrifice.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to put myself on the level of, any saint or anything. So, but yeah, it was a choice that I made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was difficult about making that transformation or that
Well, I mean,
transition?
just moving 1,000 miles away and having no connections whatsoever. All my friends, I had a tight group of friends. We were the nerds who played D&D and Ultimate Frisbee and all this other stuff together. And we grew up and stayed very close to each other. Yeah. And I was leaving all of that.
And what did that, within the two of you, when you moved out here, when you went through that major change, she kind of reunites with family, you leave family. How did it impact your relationship?
It put stresses on it, And again, that goes back to kind of the Disneyfication that I'm talking about is like, okay, this is another layer of work. And you have to consciously make a decision that you're not going to just run with the emotional, that this isn't like my emotional salvation in this relationship. And I'm going to make the other person kind of responsible for my emotional security. I've got to do this work of what I'm being triggered about and figure it out. And that's my work to do.
Yeah. And that's prior to getting into counseling and maybe having some of the information that you have now. At the time, like, what did you see were some of your adaptive traits that like maybe were disruptive to your relationship being connected?
Yeah. You started asking that question instead of disruptive. I was going to think of what helped with the resilience to maintain it. And that might be good, to share with the listeners too, to at least share my story of what it is that helped me get through a time. And I think the sense of loyalty, having grown up in a small town in Iowa with that close family, really developed a sense of being loyal to people. And when you make a commitment, you stick to it. Remember joining a bowling league when I was a kid, and after 2 weeks, hated it, wanted to quit. And my dad was like, "No, you signed up for it. You're going to finish the league." Yeah. And then you can quit after that. So it was that kind of quality that was instilled.
Yeah,
that was helpful.
Like a value, like your value that I've committed to this relationship. This is difficult, but I'm gonna make it through it.
Yeah, and then the other thing I think that was helpful was just an innate sense. What I've learned clinically is often known as an internal locus of control, which is I'm not even going to try to control anything outside of my own behaviors. Yeah. I can influence it and I can hope and expect, but I have to hold on to the fact that I don't control it. And if it doesn't go the way I want, then that doesn't give me the right to be upset or angry or to rage or, to kind of behave poorly, if you will, to it. That I have to accept what's going to happen is going to happen. And I do what I can do. And then what's going to happen happens.
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge point that we try to get couples to come back to, because couples come in crisis, and they come in a place where they're majorly disrupted, and they've maybe even lost hope in their relationship, and they're so focused on everything outside of themselves. If my partner would just start doing this, or if they would stop doing this, and they try to manipulate everything outside of themselves, which is so disempowering and so frustrating. And what we try to do is say, like, no, the only thing you have power over is how you react to this circumstance and how you can become aware of some of your unconscious responses in these moments. And that's like really hard for people. Like how, so I know you had this value of commitment, but what was like that next step of like, okay, well then how do I manage my reactions in these moments?
Sometimes it was just holding on and just saying, I'm not going to go off. I'm not going to go off. And it's not that she did anything wrong. It's just the nature of what was going on in the relationship at that time. Yeah. And God knows if you had her in the seat interviewing her, which maybe Tara can get her in here, and that would be a fun podcast to listen to. She'll have her take on it as well. Yeah. And I'm sure I tried her in many, many ways. Yeah. So I certainly don't want this to come across as a one-sided, especially when I know she and Tara will probably hear this podcast at some point. Yeah. So I think, but for me, to maintain my own composure, it wasn't like I'm going to have this grand strategy or I'm going to fix things, or it was just at that point where I was at. And of course, I'd been displaced 1,000 miles. And so I've got kind of my own culture shock and depression at not being able to walk into a new job and feel like the successful, male father figure that, again, thank you, Disney, that has an effect. And so I had kind of some of my own depression and stuff I'm working through. It was all I could do is just like, okay, just hold on and, try not to screw things up. And that's enough.
Yeah. What were the ways in which Susie showed up that helped you get through that difficult
Yeah.
time?
I mean, again, going back to that, she's always responsible, always stable. I knew on some level that even though times were trying, that she still cared, and that there was still love in the relationship, and just admired her ability to be so functional and so reliable, and such an anchor. It's like, who wants to lose that, especially when I was in the situation I was in at the time.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you. I'm going
Yeah.
to flip this on you
All
a
right,
little
do
bit,
it.
put you on the hot seat. And how long have you and Tara been together?
We've been together 12 years. We've been married just over 10.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of time.
Yeah.
The D word ever come up in your mind, even though maybe if you knew you weren't going to follow through with it, but did you ever kind of have that reaction of like, nah, I'm out. This is it. I can't do this.
We connect and we become friends with people because whether we're aware of it or not, we share values. And I'm much like you, where I'm committed.
Yeah.
Once I make a commitment, I'm committed to that.
Yeah.
And so, in very, very passive, quick moments.
Exactly.
Just when I'm, despair, when I find a lot of despair. So that doesn't linger with me, and I don't grasp onto that. And that's also, that's my avoidant attachment style too, where it can be problematic in that I'm like, oh, it's okay, everything will be okay, and then I don't deal with shit. But maybe the deeper answer to that question is Tara has an anxious attachment. And when I don't show up for her consistently or episodically in very similar ways, she has that flee instinct. And that word has been thrown around. And that's where I get really panicky.
Yeah.
I get really scared. And so when it has come up in the context of an argument or something, and that word gets thrown out, divorce, I get really scared.
Yeah.
And I react in those moments. I get, I go to, sympathetic responses of like, what the fuck? No,
Mm-hmm.
And so although I don't go there, I'm reactive to when it goes there.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of the reason I asked that question, sharing that this is a podcast and this is going to be public, is to maybe hopefully normalize that that's an okay feeling to have. We don't control our feelings. That it's an okay to have that feeling and that reaction. And it doesn't necessarily mean what the divorce word means in a rational, logical context. It just means I'm hurting, I'm feeling despair, I'm feeling whatever. And it's okay to feel that. And it doesn't mean that that's where the relationship's going to go.
Yeah. I mean, so that's been a huge part of my process is instead of going into that panic and fear place, when that does come up, I have to take it as information that Tara is trying to like communicate just how important something is to her.
Yeah, I like that.
And what she needs. And so if I can get out of my not helpful responses and just see it as like, man, this is like so important to her. Whatever is really going on here is important. And we got to take a look at this, and I got to take a look at myself. If I can go that way and use it as a useful moment, and not a like, how dare you make me feel this way moment, it actually has the chance to bring us closer together.
Yeah, it's kind of like the concept of, change tends to happen when things aren't working. Because when everything's working, why change it, right? So you stay and you get comfortable and all that. It's when something doesn't work, that's when you change. But you have to marry that up with growth. By definition, requires change. Growth is a form of, kind of reverse entropy, if you will. It's going from one state to another, which by definition is change.
Yeah.
So therefore, you can't grow unless you change. And oftentimes, by the nature of our species being so survival based, we don't change unless something's not working.
Well, and it's something that firefly light in the room thing is something that I was initially drawn to about Tara and continue to be. But there's a flip side that most people don't see about her is this other side that I've had to come to appreciate and love as well, is that she will not tolerate. She will not. She is like, you are not showing up in this way.
Yeah.
These are the needs I have. And what that's done is it's exactly what you're talking about. She has forced me
Yeah.
to change. And thank God, because I've realized in these 12 years that I have a lot of stuff to work on that I was maybe had a pretty solid insulation around it, which comes from my attachment history of not dealing with stuff.
Yeah.
And now I'm in it. Like I'm changing, and I'm doing it for our relationship. But I've also realized like she has afforded me the opportunity. She has forced me in some ways to embrace like really taking hard looks at myself and doing work that's really like nuanced, scary, and elusive.
Yeah, and to go back to the adulation of your wife is, I've seen how she can hold people and things accountable, and she does it in that firefly kind of way that like it's accountable, but it's not threatening. It's like we need to look at this, you know.
Yeah.
And there's just something about it that's so hopeful in the way that she presents that I really respect and admire in her.
Yeah. Okay, so it's like the duel of two therapists
All
sitting
right,
across each other
we're
talking
on.
about their personal. So how about you? Like, have there been moments of despair
We should
in
make
your
this a drinking
relationship?
game, you know?
Every time we say despair, any
Right.
clinical word. Have there been moments of despair for you in your relationship?
Oh yeah, and again, that goes to kind of my attachment style. I think that it's real easy for me to just say, "Oh, F it," you know.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what your audience is. I don't want any 9-year-olds to hear bad words.
I don't think we have too many 9-year-olds.
All right, well, just me. Yeah, so I have those moments where, you know, for me, it's easy for that energy just to go kind of into that anger stuff. You know, it's a shame-based response. And, you know, I try to keep that inward as much as possible. But I know there's times where, you know, Susie's taken a lot more than she deserved by any means, and throughout the years. And yeah, and I've noticed, you know, as time goes on, again, like I'm saying, the relationship's a process. It's more and more teamwork oriented. And that stuff has, you know, I don't want to play the fantasy card of, you know, she changed me and, you know, that we go into a relationship to change each other. I think there's some aspect to that, but I think it's just we've evolved as a couple, and our communication and our trust, you know, and that trust has to be built up over time. You can trust someone immediately, but it's not earned trust. And they may or may not meet up to your expectations of what you're trusting them to do. And that's not their fault because they're being who they are. That's you know, oftentimes our own misjudgment of what we could trust them with. You have to experience somebody and see what their pattern of behavior is. Then you can decide that's how much I can trust them based on the actions they've done in the past. Because anybody can say anything.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's I find and definitely see in you know, couples worked with, is that your relationship and your partner eventually bring you up to moments of your kind of worst self coming out. Like Tara has seen the parts of me that I hide from like everybody else. And there's something about the vulnerability of relationship that like allows that yuck.
Yeah. But then
out.
afterwards you learn like they saw me at this moment and they're still here. And that is powerful.
Yeah. I mean, but for me, that's been a huge evolution though, too, is because like we would have these like, you know, really tough moments. And Tara, like a half hour later would be like, I feel so close to you now. And I'm so thankful that we got to that place. And I'm like, you know, like shell shocked. Like it's really hard for me. I'm so avoidant of like, you know, really uncomfortable moments those moments were hard. And I didn't know how to like, I didn't see the value in them for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, and that's been the wisdom that she's shown me is like, no, actually those moments can actually bring us closer together.
Yeah. So my turn for my question, right?
All right.
Take a drink. How much of a factor do you think having a set of your own friends outside of your relationship? So friends that you have that you do stuff that maybe doesn't involve your relationship with Tara. Does that play a role in the stability of your relationship or for your growth as an individual, or is it just kind of a coincidental thing?
I mean, that's a tough one because that's like a work in progress for me. Tara always, she maintains a lot of relationships, especially like, she makes time for that. And I sometimes won't, I don't recognize that I need that, or I just don't prioritize it. But it's super important, right? Because the connection I have with a friend is different and feeds a different part of me
Yeah.
than gets fed in my relationship. And if I try to get the needs that I have in a friendship from Tara, it sort of taxes our relationships in other ways. So for me, it's been like important to look at like, I got to continue to maintain, for me, especially male friendships. I have to have some male friends. I have to have people I call. I have to go do things. But like, like you and I, like we've, know each other for a while. We sort of like became probably friends in the last like couple years. But we even, how many times have you and I gone and done something, together? We have conversations over the phone. We get together with Tara and Susie present.
Yeah.
But that's a big struggle for me.
I've, as we're speaking about it, and that's part of why I asked the question, was let's just kind of throw stuff out there and see what it brings out. And it makes me think of, from our clinical studies about the concept of individuation and how important that is. And it's kind of like you have to know yourself before you can know yourself in a relationship, because you need to know what you can contribute. And you have to know your boundaries of where you begin or where you end and the other person begins, and what part of your life you want to share. And I think having those friendships, those relationships outside of the marriage are important because they help with that individuation process. If you don't individuate, you get so enmeshed with your partner, I think that can lead to increased conflict, because then the other person becomes more needing to be responsible for your emotional well-being because you're so invested in them that they're everything. Yeah. And then that can lead to power differentials and problems in the relationship that way. Whereas if you've at least got a sense of yourself outside of the relationship, then you know what you're bringing to the relationship.
Well, and I think men also get really, I don't know if the word is confused or whatever, but like so much of our identity comes from work. And like I get fed in a lot of ways by, especially as a therapist, where you really you do connect with people, but it's totally lopsided.
Yeah.
I get so many of my needs met through my professional life, and it occupies such a huge chunk of my day.
Sure.
That then I kind of think like, well, I'm doing good. Like, I'm okay. I'm connecting with other people, whether it's colleagues, employees. But I don't get that. I think of like my friendships have a free range nature to them.
Yeah. It's like you can't just go ranting to your employees or go on a rant with a client, God forbid. Sometimes our own needs that need to get met, that, as part of our individual expression, having those friendships outside can be a really helpful piece to it.
Absolutely. I mean, because it just feels like there's aspects of myself that I can't connect to except in friendships.
Yeah.
And there's for me, a lot of what is like joy is my friendships. And I have, but I had more dynamic or more consistent connections with friends when I was younger that allowed me to like really like play outside the lines.
Yeah.
That as an adult, I haven't cultivated those. I certainly haven't given them the time. And then there's this whole part of myself that's sort of dying on the vine.
Yeah. And I think as we get older, it can become more difficult with that, because we get so many more demands and things that take up our time that we lose track of that. And it's harder to make friends and stuff.
It's really hard.
Because we become isolated in our silos. Whereas, when you're younger, you're in school and every year's a whole new set of classes with a whole new set of people you're meeting. So it's such a social grinder. I mean, when you get older, we get settled into our little silos. And so then it gets harder to, and I see that with clients a lot too, when they have a relationship breakup or whatever, or they've got depression, they don't know how to go out and make friends anymore. And then you add technology to the mix and how difficult it is already to get together. And then when everybody's doing it through technology instead of going face to face and meeting up is easy.
Yeah. Have you maintained a lot of solid friendships?
A lot of, that's a great question. A lot of my friends from Houston that I was talking about that grew up, We get together on Discord. One of them, been a programmer by trade, and he retired a few years ago. And so he has two grandkids who are really into Minecraft, and he wanted to learn to program in JavaScript. So he became a Modcraft mod developer. And so he writes mod programs for Minecraft, and he's actually gotten pretty big. He has, 20, 30 million downloads or whatever of his programs and stuff. But so then he uses us, the friends, we get together on Discord and chat, and we'll play together to play test his programming to look for the bugs and stuff. So we've stick together there. I'll fly out to Houston a couple times a year, and we'll get together and hang out. And so I do try to stick together with friends.
Yeah. Has Susie been pretty supportive in that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. She, and I think that's one of her talents is she knows how important that is to have those connections. Yeah.
So, at this point in our lives, we're pretty settled into like life, right? We're both, I think you're in your 50s as well, right?
Yeah, on the upper side.
Upper side of it.
Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah. Like, what are the challenges that you're seeing in your relationship now as somebody who's, not 30, not 40, you guys don't have young kids anymore. I mean,
nope, they're 20 and 23 now.
Yeah. We see a lot of people who come into therapy in their 50s and 60s. And so I'm curious with you, like, what are the challenges you see in this phase of your relationship?
We're really fortunate. I don't see any challenges whatsoever. Have continued to get closer than ever. And I do attribute some of that to we work together in our own, kind of family-owned business where we have a lot of interaction. So we'll always have stuff to talk about and to share through the day. And that's really helped build kind of that teamwork sense for us. And so we're really more than ever kind of two halves of the same whole. And very clearly defined, she knows her half and I know my half. But we work together, and I think we're closer than ever.
Yeah.
So if you disagree, Susie, let me know.
It'd be good to know.
Right. If it's a problem, then I can come back on the recently divorced podcast.
That's amazing to say, like, okay, so then let's look at like foundation. Like, what's the foundation that the two of you built that's allowing you to go through a transition into being empty nesters, to have a business together? Like, what's made it work for you guys?
Wow. And I wish I could condense that magic into a pithy sentence for everybody and share that. Yeah, I do think that, as we talked about earlier, that internal locus of control piece has been just instrumental for both of us, learning to not try to control what the other person's going to do, and to take that teamwork approach that, we're in it together. It's us against the world, if you will.
Do you and Susie both connect on that commitment piece that you talked about at the very beginning, that like once you commit to something?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. She's probably even more of a loyal person than I am. I mean, she's, again, stable and consistent, and the sun sets on the West Coast every day. So, yeah.
She's provided an ongoing stability for you.
Yeah.
What do you provide for her?
You'll have to ask her because I have no clue. I think I bring energy, the vision. I'm the vision, and she, I tell her, let's go do this. And so I have some good perceptions, and, again, all those qualities of, for those of you who are parents of ADHD kids, all those things that like drive you crazy as a parent are the spirit, the drive, the individualism, all that stuff. That's going to pay in spades for them when they're adults. And I think a lot of that is what I bring. So I bring the ideas, the creativity, the vision, the energy, and then she makes it happen.
Yeah. So. What a great partnership you guys have built together.
Yeah. I'm blessed more than I deserve, for sure.
That's sweet. More than you deserve.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
We could go deep there.
We could. We're not gonna. That's another.
All right. Well, hey, Tim, thank you so much for coming in. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, my pleasure, my friend.
I respect you very much, and I know that you're doing some really cool stuff, and we always want to give our listeners an opportunity to hear a little bit about that. Can you tell us just what you guys are doing, and
sure,
if somebody
absolutely.
wanted to connect with you and hear more?
Yeah, and I just want to start out, it's mutual, the respect and admiration, EJ.
Thank you.
We had a class together. I'm not going to say how many years ago. It was over a decade, and I knew from that class on that, there was some kind of astral connection there between the two of us that would pay off at some point. So we own Cathexis and Cathexis Psychedelics. I think right now we're putting a bid down to buy property, and we want to build. I'd go into some of the details about it, but it's preliminary, so I won't. But I think it's going to be pretty exciting what we're building, and hopefully hope to see that in the next year or two to have that done.
Yeah. What's your vision? I mean, you talked about you see, you have vision, you have drive. She helps you make it happen.
Yeah. So
What's your vision?
My vision. Well, for the building, I have definite vision of what we want to do, how we want to build it. But there's a lot of like what if still to happen to it. So I don't want to put it out there and then have it not happen.
Sure.
So we'll just look forward to, keep an eye on us, and you'll see what's coming up with that. The vision for us is I want to keep a heavy emphasis on training, teaching at NAU. We really want to make our facility a place to really grow young and talented therapists. And by that way, I think I can make a bigger impact in helping the community than just being in the chair by myself all the time.
Yeah. That's one of the most exciting things that sort of organically happened for us as well, is that therapy is amazing. Like I still love, the days where I have direct contact with couples or individuals.
Yeah.
And I love that, like that focused concentration on helping, one person or a couple. But when you start to work with therapists and you support them in their process, there's this exponential positive impact you're having on the world.
Yeah.
That every one of those people that you're supporting in their skills is contacting over their career thousands of people. And that's just like
right. And then thinking forward of how they might go into supervisory roles themselves, and hopefully we can model what a positive supervisor looks like. But I'm also with you that there's nothing like boots on the ground as a military term.
Yeah.
In the Marine Corps, they always emphasize small unit leadership. And that's, when you lead, you're in the stink with them. And there's nothing I love more than actually being in therapy with clients and getting to hear their stories and work with them. And
I think a couple of things that unite you and I is like, and I don't know if I've ever like put a voice to it with you, is one, I think like we both have like this dedication to like making the world a better place, to like really impacting people in a really positive way. And then layered in is that you're like a very fun person.
Oh,
it's fun. And man, this can be heavy work, but it's actually like a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. It's I wouldn't want to grow old with anything else.
Yeah,
so
we're lucky.
Well, one of the things I wanted to end with, putting in here, is there was a movie in 1978 that is a very campy and cheesy movie. It was written by Bruce Lee and one of his students who's a celebrity at the time, Bruce Colburn, I think was his name. And it was called Circle of Iron.
Oh, I never saw this.
And Bruce Lee unfortunately passed away before the movie actually got made, so David Carradine was the main actor. Okay. So imagine a Bruce Lee movie meshed with a David Carradine movie, and that gives you the kind of the feel of how the movie is, right? Yeah. Like real 80s B-movie kung fu stuff. But when he wrote the script, it was really based on a lot of his Zen Buddhist principles. And so there's the guy who's going through the journey, and he's trying to find this book that has this mystical meaning to it. And he wants to find the guardian of it and defeat the guardian of the book. And then along the way, he meets this character called the Blind Man, who's kind of like the guru, Joseph Campbell's mentor figure in the hero's journey, if you will. And then Bruce Carradine plays like every other character in the movie, just about, except for one. But they're different characters. It's hilarious. But at one point where he's being guided by the blind man, the mentor character, he's reflecting on something he learned on one of the trials to getting to the book. And it was about he fell in love with this woman, and they got together, they hooked up or whatever. And then he woke up in the morning and she was dead. She had been killed by the tribe leader of the place where she was at. And so then he's like processing, and he realized that it's all really was just a metaphor, and that he can't possess the woman, that something he really wanted, he can't possess it. And the blind man's response was, each moment that passes changes you. You cannot possess even yourself. How can you hope to possess anything else? And I think of, in terms of a relationship, like with Susie and I, you were asking about what's one of the resilient factors. I think that goes with that internal locus control, in that sense of, I don't possess her, she doesn't possess me, and we don't try.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I identify a lot with that of like, I can't control Tara. And when I have that instinct to do it, it's a bad instinct. You know, it's a bad instinct because that's what I've loved about her is that she is not controllable.
Yeah.
That she
so I take that away.
yeah, exactly. Why take away what's amazing and beautiful and about her? And then just as a clinician, I also see it of like how much I see people wanting to control their partner's behaviors, mostly out of trying to create an environment that then they will feel more at ease in, you know, and that letting go, you know, and then the other part of that, I guess, was that you can't control yourself, you know, you can get wiser and more, you know, insightful, but letting go is a pretty important part of wellness.
Yeah, right on, man.
All right. Well, thank you again, Tim. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. We appreciate you immensely. Every single email we get with ideas, with the struggles that you're facing, really help us create this podcast, which I know, because I've gotten feedback, is really helping people. And so thank you. You know, please, if there is anything you want us to take on, you want us to talk about, please send us an email, info@relationshiprenovation.com. We appreciate everybody out there. And as Tara says, take care of yourself, take care of each other.
Me and you just singing on the train, me and you listening to the rain, me and you, we are the